So this is done through the IRS. And then who touched on it? Was it Grace, maybe? I can't remember. We'll talk about BOI. So this is a new requirement, and I'm gonna touch on it, but it really is an easy new requirement for business owners. So this first kind of pre-work is figuring out what you want to name your business. So before you register your business with the Minnesota Secretary of State, you need to take a few steps to ensure that the name you want for your business is available and that it follows the business name guidelines that the Minnesota Secretary of State has set. So first, you'll want to brainstorm some name ideas. I'm curious if anyone wants to put in the chat if they already have their business name. Feel free to do that. I'd love to see some. But if you don't, you're going to want to kind of brainstorm a business name that reflects your brand and your values and what you'll be selling. You're going to want to choose something that's unique, but maybe not so unique that it's hard to remember or hard to spell or hard to find online. Like I said before, my business name is Beck's Books. My name is Becky and I sell books, and it's very easy to remember. It's easy to spell. I can shorten it. Sometimes we just call it Beck's. So, I mean, I'm biased, but I like my business name. And so that's just something to keep in mind, right? Something that's memorable. You also want to avoid names that are too similar to established brands, right? A resource that I really like to just kind of get some inspiration for finding a business name is namelix.com, and I will put that in the chat. Just because I did take so much time in the beginning, I won't pull it up, but it is a really easy to use website. And what it has you do is just put in some kind of like keywords about your business, and it comes up with name ideas for you. So it can just kind of get your creative juices flowing, help you think of some ideas that you maybe didn't have before. So if you're struggling for a business name, check that out. It is a cool website. And I saw Bethany put in the chat, Bethany's Kitchen. I think that is perfect. I love that. You can call it Bethany's. It tells us what you do. I love that, Bethany. You'll also want to check that the website for your business name is available, assuming that you'll use a website, which most businesses have even just a simple website to show that you exist. But when I was creating my business, I looked up becksbooks.com and it was not available. And so our website is becksbooksmpls.com because we're based in Minneapolis. So a good way to do this is to just open Google, type in the website that you think you might want to use, and see if someone already exists on there. If they do, then you might consider changing your business name or maybe adding MN for Minnesota or MPLS for Minneapolis or something like that to the end of your business name or your website. You'll also need to follow Minnesota guidelines. So what this means is that your name can't mislead the public. So you can't say like, I am Beck's Books, but all we sell is pizza. It has to be truthful in what you're selling. And it also can't conflict with a business name that already exists in Minnesota. So if a business had already existed that was called Beck's Books in Minnesota and they're registered, I wouldn't be able to use that name. So a tool that you can look up if your business name is available to register with Minnesota is actually the Minnesota Secretary of State Business Name Search Tool is what it's called. So I'm going to just kind of briefly walk through these steps, and then I'll actually pull up the website and show you what that looks like. So you'll visit the Minnesota Secretary of State website. You'll see at the top they have a tab that says Business Filings Online, and then you'll click on Business Name Search. The Business Name Search tool is also linked in that handout that's in Google Classroom. And then you'll input the business name that you want for your business. You'll see what comes up. So you'll see if there's any exact matches, or maybe that any that are really similar and you don't want to like anything to get kind of like confusing. And then you'll review the results and adjust if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. Let's see. If anyone wants to follow along, I will also put this in the chat. But again, I'm here on the Minnesota Secretary of State website. This is what it looks like. It says search business filings. And so you'll just put in your business name here and you'll hit search. So I've put in my own business name, so I know that it's going to be taken, but you can see here what that looks like. So it lists any businesses with a match. All right. So if I did not own my business and I was like, oh, shoot, that's already taken, I might try a few different variations. I might just try calling it Bex, and I can see what comes up that way. So this is a good way to kind of play around and see if there is another business that already exists with that name, or if there are business names that are very similar to the business you want to start, just because that might be confusing for customers, right? Bex is a very simple name, and so I see Bex Auto, Bex Books, Bex Burger. So something to consider. Again, you want to choose a name that's memorable and stands out. But this is a really great tool to see if your business name is already taken. Any questions on how to use this tool? Yeah, I see.
Hi, I raised my hand before you could ask.
You're on it.
Should we check even the inactive ones?
So if they're listed, here, they're active.
Okay.
And so once you actually start going, which I'll cover next, the process of registering, it will flag you if a business with that name already exists. So this is a kind of a pre-step, but you will learn once you start actually registering if a business already exists with this name. Okay. You can also, I think this in tandem with like just Googling the business name, because if there's like a huge business, even if they're not based in Minnesota with Bex Books, I might just not want that confusion when people are Googling my business name, right? So I think this legally kind of checks those boxes, but also just kind of Googling around, checking out websites with similar business names is also just good practice.
Okay. And then if the search results show up as nothing, then it's available.
Then you're good to go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good questions. Thanks, Yara. Mm-hmm. And Mariello's asked, what happens if after registering the name, another identical name appears in the system? That is, two identical names registered. That is not possible. So once you're registered with the Minnesota Secretary of State, that is your business name. And in the same way, you can't claim, for my example here, Bex Auto. Once you're in the system, no one can claim your name either.
But that is just in Minnesota, or
that is just in Minnesota. Yep.
But maybe in another state, maybe they can get the same name or not.
Yeah, that is correct. So other states have different databases. So we use the Minnesota Secretary of State. This is who tracks business names. If you're in South Dakota, then it would be the South Dakota Secretary of State. So if you're worried about overlap, for example, if you're serving a community close to North Dakota, you might also check the North Dakota SOS, the Secretary of State, to see if there are any business names that align, just not for legal purposes, but just so as to not confuse customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I said the same names that I went in Ohio. So that's why.
Yeah, no, that's not, legally, that's not an issue at all. So do you mind sharing the name?
Their name is Cleanup Team.
Cleanup Team. Okay, perfect. Should we let's search that. Let's see if it's available in Minnesota. I don't know, maybe you have a dash or something in there, but we can just search here. Is this you? Do you already have your LLC?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's not a problem. So The only thing that you have to consider when legally naming your business is, does it already exist in the Minnesota Secretary of State, and that it doesn't match like an already super established business. This is where you get into like copyright and trademark stuff, which I'm not going to get too in the weeds on. But this is a really good place to start. And if you have questions, you can reach out to the Minnesota Secretary of State.
Okay.
But legally, you don't have to worry about that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm also not a lawyer, just to clarify, but from what I've learned through going through this process multiple times, as long as you're not serving the same area, and it's available through the Minnesota Secretary of State, then you're good. All right, let me resituate my screen again. I want to be able to see the chat. Tam's plus size fit. I love that, Tammy. Okay. So that is kind of the first step, is making sure that your name is available through the Minnesota Secretary of State. Like I said, I think it was to Sierra. You might also just want to Google around and make sure that there's not like a really, famous, well-known business with the exact same name, because that might get confusing for customers. It also will probably like cover up search results for your business if they're really, really well established. So it's something to consider. So once you've done this, once you've done the name check, you'll go on to actually register your business with the Minnesota Secretary of State. So what this means, to my understanding, you've talked about like LLCs and S Corps and that kind of thing. So this is the step where you're actually filing that with the Minnesota Secretary of State so that they know that you exist as a legal entity. So just like with the last slide, I'm just going to kind of walk through these steps, and then I'll pull up the website and just show you what that looks like. So you will need to create an online account with the Minnesota Secretary of State in order to do this. You'll just need an email that you have access to. You'll select the business structure that you'll be using. So if you've decided on an LLC, which is absolutely the most common, that's what my business is. It sounds like that's what a few of you have already. That's where you'll select your business structure. You'll then complete the application. So I'm not going to go through the whole application because it needs a bunch of private information and business information, but I'll show you what the first couple of steps look like. You will need your name, your address, your contact information, and of course your business name. You'll then pay the filing fee. So I'll touch on what that looks like, how much that is. And then you will, once you've gone through this process, if you've done it correctly and you've gone through all of the steps, you will receive an email confirmation from the Minnesota Secretary of State with some attachments saying you're an LLC, you're good to go, you can start doing business. And it will have a document that you'll want to save that says that you have LLC status or whatever status you've selected. So I am going to once again pull this up. So this is where we searched the name. It's actually on this same website, the Minnesota Secretary of State. So you'll just go to Business Filings Online here. If it will load, there we go. And I will, this is the same. This is the same link as above, but I'll share it for easy access. So this is where we search names. You'll just scroll down a little bit, and this is where you file a new business or nonprofit. So again, assuming you're an LLC, some of you are, some of you will be something different. You will select domestic or foreign. So if you're doing business here in the US, you'll select domestic. I am going to sign in just so I can show you the next step. All right, let's go back to that. So I'm going to select limited liability company domestic. You'll select whether or not you're a professional firm. So you can see that it's automatically checked no here for me because the vast majority of businesses don't fall under this professional firm classification. If you're opening like an accounting firm or a legal firm or a clinic or something like that, you would check yes. If you are opening something like that, you should be working with a business lawyer. because that's where things get a little more complex. But based on what I've heard about all of your business ideas, it sounds like none of you will have to worry about this. You can go here to learn more if you still have questions about that. But for the purposes of this example, I'll just click no. And then this is where you put in the name that you want. So this was an example I was using earlier is Tree City. And then here, because I selected LLC on the previous page, it's just asking how I want LLC to appear on any kind of documentation that they'll provide me. This doesn't affect your filing status or anything like that. It doesn't change how you do taxes. It's really just how do you want this information listed on the documents that we're going to send you. I select LLC because for me it's the easiest. I don't have to remember the dots or how to spell liability. I can just do LLC. So that's my recommendation, but do whatever feels right for you. So this is where it's confirming that that name is indeed available. And I'll just click File. And so this is where the actual process starts. Again, because I would need to share a bunch of like private information, I'm not going to walk through this, but this is really user-friendly. This is just owners. So basically replace organizers with owners. So you'll just share your contact information. If you are opening your business with a partner, you can add multiple organizers on this screen, and you should if you have multiple owners. So for me and my husband, we each filled this out. But then it just moves through the process of this application. So you will have all of this information. A lot of it is just like, how do we get in touch with you? Like they want to know who you are if you're opening a business in Minnesota. This Minnesota Business Snapshot is an optional piece of the application where you can share ownership information. So if you identify as, for example, an immigrant or a veteran, you can share that information with them if you so choose, and they use it to kind of inform some of their policies and stuff. The rest of it is required. So again, this is what this looks like. You'll walk through this process. If you have any questions as you're going through this form, you can reach out directly to the Minnesota Secretary of State. Again, this handout that you have in Google Classrooms, scrolling down right here, Minnesota Secretary of State Business Services is where you can reach out if you have questions about that application. They're really helpful. I called them probably 2 or 3 times just because I have a business partner. So some of the pieces were a little more confusing to me. And they were really, really helpful. So if you have questions during that process, definitely reach out to them. Okay. So once you apply, you will have to pay the filing fee. So if you're filing online, it is $155. If you decide to mail in your application, which you can download from their website and print either at home or at the library, it is $135. So you save $20. When I was filing for my LLC, I initially wanted to mail it in to save the $20, but they told me that it was going to be something like 6 weeks to wait for them to process it. And I already had my launch date planned. I wanted to open a business bank account, which I couldn't do without being registered. And so I couldn't wait a month and a half. So I ended up just filing online, and I got my LLC paperwork confirmation from them the exact same day via email. So it's up to you. If you're not in a time crunch and you can save $20, I recommend mail. But if you have some kind of other things that are like waiting on that, just know that it can take quite a bit of time. Any questions about that first part of actually registering with the state of Minnesota? Okay.
That looks like a question for me. No, the program does not help out with the registration fee. All the business-related expenses will be on the business owner. This would just help with training. So if you need more training and preparation to start your business, Then we work with Women Venture and Goodwill to help you with that and provide services.
Cool. Thank you, Leah. All right. So that first piece, like I said, is through the Minnesota Secretary of State. The next piece, oh, go ahead.
Looks like Tantan has her
Oh,
hand up.
Tantan.
If you
Yeah,
don't mind.
go ahead.
Yes, teacher. I want to question about when you're not ready to open your own business, you don't need to apply, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
That's a really good question, Tantan. You got ahead of me a little bit, which is totally fine. But yeah, if you are not ready to open your business, if you're not ready to actually start doing business, there's no reason to register super duper early. I'll give kind of like a tip on when is a good time to register. Really good question. Thank you. Did I see Tammy? Yes.
So I know that like if you're not ready, so okay, my question is when you're in the process of getting ready for like to open up your business and is not quite ready to open up yet, can't you still register your business ahead of time if that name is not taken? Can't you just like to secure your business name that you plan on opening up, can you register that ahead of time?
Yes, also such a good question. Thank you guys. You can reserve a business name without going through the full process of registering your business. So if you're worried about your name getting scooped up by someone else, you can go through the Minnesota Secretary of State. You'll just maybe Google Minnesota Secretary of State business name reservation or something like that. I can see if I can find a link too. And you can pay $35 to reserve your business name for 1 year. So no one else can take that business name. You don't have to go through the whole process of registering your business at that point, but it will keep your name secured for 1 year. And then if you still haven't launched after a year, you would need to re-up that if you want to continue to keep it safe. That's a really good question. Thanks, Tammy.
Can you please put that information in the chat because I would like to do that?
I'll put Minnesota SOS, so that's Secretary of State,
Okay.
business name reservation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So
And Becky, that is all in the links, right? In the document. I mean, that Secretary of State website is one of
the
the
Minnesota Secretary of State website is, I don't have a direct link for reserving a name without registering, but their website's pretty easy to use. So I think you can
Okay.
find it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can show folks where that is in the
Cool.
Google Classroom when we're done.
All right. So once you've registered with the Minnesota Secretary of State, you're registered in the state of Minnesota, but you'll also need to register as a business with the federal government, and that is the IRS, so the Internal Revenue Service. You will need to apply for an EIN. So EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. You'll also sometimes hear it called a federal tax identification number. Those are referring to the same thing. So you'll need an EIN to open a business bank account, which I hope all of you do. We'll touch on business finances. You'll need it if you plan to hire employees, and you'll also need it to file business taxes. So everyone, if you're planning on launching your business, you will need to apply for an EIN. Once you've applied, you'll receive a 9-digit code. That is basically the way I explain it is like your business's social security number or your business's TIN. So this is something that identifies your business to the government, and it's something you should not share with anybody unless they're a trusted source. So like your bookkeeper, your accountant, but anyone else does not need that information. And my tip when you are applying for an EIN with the IRS, is to screenshot it or download the web page or even print it, and keep that handy because the IRS will not email you confirmation like the Minnesota Secretary of State does. So once you've applied through their website, it will pop up a screen saying you're done, you're good, and it will have that code. And that's all you get. You don't get an email, you don't get a piece of paper. I am very glad I screenshotted it because I was expecting an email that never came. So that's me learning and sharing that information with you. So make sure that when you're going through that process, that you remember to save that somewhere safe. I'm just going to show you a tip as well. We're done with this. Okay. So when you want to apply for your EIN, what I recommend doing is you can Google apply for an EIN or EIN application or something like that. And I want to advise you to ignore these sponsored posts. So when you Google something, a lot of times these sponsored posts will come up at the top. These are people who have paid to appear at the top of your search. Some of these, I hate to say, might be scams. I don't know. Or they might be a business, a company that's trying to have you pay for them to file an EIN for you, which is not something you need to do. It's a very easy process. So I strongly recommend scrolling right past these sponsored posts and only going to irs.gov. And this is where you'll apply for that EIN. So just to show you what that looks like, as long as it has gov after it, I'm here on the IRS website. It has some of these tips for making sure that you're eligible to apply for an EIN. So you will need your social or your TIN, and you'll click apply now. And so this is very similar to the Minnesota Secretary of State business registration process. You'll need some pieces of information about yourself and your business. I think this took me maybe 15 minutes to fill out. And again, just Tammy, I will call on you in just 2 seconds. I just want to show you, if you have questions going through this process, here is the contact information for that. So this is that document that's in Google Classroom. This is this national number, but we also have a local taxpayer assistance center right here in the Twin Cities. And so I find it easier to get in touch with them, and they have a little more insight on like the local requirements and stuff like that. So they're really helpful. Tammy, did you have a question?
I did. So this is the one. So the one that you're showing, like the beneficial ownership information, is this the one that we register with the EIN? That's the cost of $100 and some. This one here.
So no. So an LLC through the state of Minnesota is the 155 or 135 by mail.
Okay.
An EIN, this is a good question though. An EIN is free, but you will need to be registered in the state of Minnesota in order to go through this process. Good question. Yeah, an EIN is free, but it is something you got to do. And then the other kind of piece of this puzzle, I have to reorganize my screen every time. Here we go. Of getting registered with the federal government is filing a BOIR. There are so many short names and acronyms tonight, you guys. And I know it's easy to get them confused. This is a new requirement as of this year. So if you are an LLC or a corporation, this is a requirement. You have to file what is called a beneficial ownership information report. And this is a federal requirement, essentially telling the government who owns your business, who benefits from your business. So for me, it's me and my husband. If you're just the only one running your business, you'll just need to input some information about yourself. You will need an EIN to complete this report. And you do only have 30 days within registering your business to get this done, to be like legal, right? It truly takes maybe 5 minutes. It's very, very easy. It's at fincen.gov. I can show you just what that website looks like. This is useful I hope this is useful for you guys too, for me to show you this. I just like to know like that I'm on the right thing, right? So if this is what you're looking at, then you're good. Fincen.gov, this is also linked on that document. But I just put it in the chat if you want to open it up. This is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. So this is where, since this is still a new thing, you can see here it's just right at the top of their page to file that report. So again, this is an easy process. It's really just another checkbox that you're legal and your business is staying legal. Bethany, good question. This is within 30 days of registering your business as a legal entity. So registering it in the state of Minnesota with the Secretary of State. Such good questions, everyone. I really appreciate that. All right. Let me recalibrate my screen. Oh, and Tammy, yeah, go ahead.
One last question. With that being said, with the registry that I asked for with the business, like, that you said would be valid for a year, would you still have to officially register under that? Like, is that a time frame to do that? Like, I know that it's a 30-day one and it's the one for a year.
Yeah.
Would that be under the same category, or is that just
No,
two different things?
yeah, those are two different things. So when you're just reserving your name, you don't have to go through any of this until you actually register your business with the Minnesota Secretary of State. I know that's kind of confusing, but if you are only reserving your name, you're not starting business yet, you don't have to do the EIN or the BOI until you're ready to actually register your business with the Minnesota Secretary of State and then start these other steps. Really good question. Okay, and so I think this is what Tantan was asking. Such a good question. Basically, when should you be doing all of this? And my answer to that is when you're ready to start actually doing business. So that is selling your goods or performing whatever services you'll be performing. And the reason being is that anytime you interact with the public, you open yourself up to the risk of someone maybe suing you, hopefully not ever, but you do open yourself up to that risk, right? So when you register your business as a legal entity, it means that people can't sue you for your personal assets. So that might be your checking or savings accounts. If you own a home or a vehicle, those items are protected if you own them personally. And someone can go after your business savings if you have a business vehicle, if they're registered under your business, but they can't go after your personal assets. So you should register your business before you start operations to make sure that you're protected. Like I was saying earlier, there's really no need to register your business if you're still in the early planning stages, because you might have to start keeping track of things and filing things, which is just unnecessary if you're not really selling anything. So don't do it until you're really moving forward. You want to open a business bank account, you have a launch date in mind, that kind of thing. Any questions about that piece of it? I know that's a lot of information. Does Women Venture help new business owners find a location for their business? That's a really good question. We have some resources on our website. I'm going to put it in the chat. I think it's just womenventure.org/client resources. Apologies if that brings you to a page that doesn't exist. But if that brings you to a page that doesn't exist, there's a tab in the upper right corner with client resources. So it's not a direct service that we provide, but you can check out our resources page for some other community organizations. If no location, should owners sell offline? Tammy, are you asking about maybe selling online before you can secure a brick and mortar?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start. I encourage almost every business owner, if there's a way to start your business kind of slowly and ramp it up, I think that's really effective. Some of our most successful businesses have started just selling online or selling at pop-up markets or starting as a food truck, because it gives you a way to kind of test the waters. You don't have to invest a ton of money in the beginning, and it allows you to kind of ramp up your business, right? Like you could still work full time while you're starting your business. That's what I've done. I hope that I can own a brick and mortar bookstore one day. I can't right now. So we're starting small, right? So I think that's great, Tammy. Especially, I mean, e-commerce is just absolutely booming right now. Ever since the pandemic, people are buying online more than ever. So yeah, I think that's a great way to start. All right. I'm going to move on to the exciting world of sales taxes, permits, and licenses. A few of you voiced that this was something you were interested in, so I'm excited to cover this. The first piece of this that I'm going to cover is sales tax. So the question being, do I need to collect sales tax? The answer is that it depends on what you sell and also where you're selling. So depending on what you sell, you might be required to collect sales tax. As a bookseller, I am. So I collect sales tax in my business. These are just a few kind of common examples of things that you'll need to collect sales tax for. So physical goods. So if you're selling something that you can hold in your hands, so like a book or an electronic, you'll need to collect sales tax. If you are selling services, so there are certain services that you do need to collect sales tax on. Not all of them, but some. So like lodging, leasing, repairs. I think someone mentioned possibly a repair business. Maybe I made that up. Those are services that you would need to collect sales tax on. What's next? Digital goods. This is one that gets missed a lot. People think that you don't have to collect sales tax on digital goods. I think we just associate sales tax with, like I said, like a thing you can hold, but that's not always the case. So if you're selling like an ebook, for example, or if you're making music, you're selling a music download, you do have to collect sales tax on those things. Online sales. So this is one that also gets missed a lot. If you're selling in Minnesota to Minnesota residents, you have to collect sales tax just like you would if you were selling in a physical store. There's some more kind of like red tape and like requirements if you're selling out of state, which I don't think I'm going to get super in the weeds on, but I do have experience as an e-commerce business selling out of state. If anyone has questions about that, Leah, feel free to connect them with me. Because that process was honestly confusing. And so I'm happy to share the knowledge that I've gained if anyone has questions about selling online and how you collect taxes. Tammy, we don't collect sales tax in Minnesota on clothing products. With that being said, one of those kind of weird things is that if you are selling out of state and you hit a certain threshold in that out of state, you will need to collect sales tax if that state taxes clothing. It's so confusing. Really great question, Tammy. And then if I left my employees to run the store and just wait, I must have missed. Oh, what if I wanted to move out of state after I started a business? Bethany, I understand the situation, but I'm wondering, what is it that you're wondering? Like if that's just possible to run a business from out of state? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. There's plenty of businesses where the owners don't live in the state or, you know, part-time live in the state. And Leah put a really good note just about collecting sales tax if you're selling online to other states. It can absolutely be confusing, and I'm happy to help offline if that's helpful for anybody. There is also the Minnesota Department of Revenue is who kind of runs that sales tax piece of it. So they're a really good resource if you have questions about like what you do and don't need to collect sales tax on. They have a whole guide, and I think that is included in that handout on basically what needs to be taxed, what you need to collect sales tax on and what don't you. I think it's just called the Minnesota Sales and Use Tax Business Guide, and that's a really, really helpful resource. But again, their contact information is on that document, and they can help if you have any specific questions, because it really does differ so much from business to business and industry to industry. I kind of highlighted a few of these already, but some common sales mistakes that we see in small businesses a lot are not collecting sales tax on online sales. Again, that can be kind of confusing, especially if you start selling out of state. But the Minnesota Department of Revenue can help you with any questions on that. Same with not collecting sales tax on digital goods. So I don't think that that applies to anyone in this room based on what you shared in your introductions. But something to keep in mind if you decide to maybe like sell an ebook about what you do, you would need to collect sales tax on that. And then another one is just missing sales tax deadlines, especially when you're starting out and you're worried about so many other things. It's really easy to miss a sales tax deadline. What I do, and I'll go over some of these tips later in the session, is I have a calendar with all these reminders. So I have to pay sales tax quarterly. How often you pay sales tax is based on how much sales tax you collect. So I pay it quarterly. I have it on my calendar when I need to pay it. And then I do it then. But it's really easy to miss those sales tax deadlines, especially when you're just starting out and you're maybe not used to it. So definitely check out the Minnesota Department of Revenue. They have a page on figuring out what your sales tax schedule would be. And if you do need to collect sales tax, if you kind of go through these steps and determine, yes, my business does need to collect sales tax on some or all of what you're selling, you'll need to register for a tax ID number with the state of Minnesota. That's another pretty easy process. You'll do it through the Minnesota Department of Revenue's website. Just like with all the other applications we've gone through, you'll just need some information about yourself and your business, and information on where you'll be selling within the state too. Any questions about sales tax? Yes, Bethany, good question. That is different from the EIN. So the EIN is through the IRS, so it's federal. Your tax ID number is your Minnesota tax ID number. So that's through the state of Minnesota. Good question. All right, cool. So another common question from new business owners is, do I need any permits? Some businesses need permits in order to comply with any local or state laws. And some really common examples that are going to apply to many of you in the room are food businesses. So if you're selling or handling food, you'll need a permit from the Minnesota Health Department. Any home-based businesses, so this is where you are hosting customers in your home, or you're entering, I believe if you're entering someone else's home to provide a service, you may need permits for that. Retail businesses, so again, that sales tax permit, that Minnesota sales tax ID I mentioned, is needed for any business selling goods. You might also need a zoning permit. So if you're in a physical space, certain cities or counties might require a zoning permit. That's going to depend on where you're located. And then service providers. So things like salons, massage therapists, many of them need specialty permits, excuse me. And permits and licenses are different. So this is permits. So a permit is something you apply for, just kind of in the same way of all these other applications that we've talked about. So it's something you provide them with some information, and usually the turnaround is pretty quick. Whereas a license is just like a driver's license, right? So it's something you have to like train for, you test for. If you pass, you can get the license. So some businesses do need licenses. Some common examples for licenses are childcare businesses. You would need to work with the Department of Human Services, DHS, within Minnesota, to make sure that your facility is meeting like health and safety standards. If you are in the cosmetology field, you would need licensing. If you are already looking at opening up your own business, I'm assuming many of you are already licensed by the Board of Cosmetology here in Minnesota. Healthcare workers, so pretty much any healthcare worker will need to be appropriately licensed through whatever relevant boards here in Minnesota. And then also real estate agents, which I didn't hear any in this room, so I'm not going to get too in the weeds on that. But you'll always want to check if your specific business type or your specific role within your business needs a specific license. So the Minnesota, I'm going to share some resources on the next slide, actually. I was going to get ahead of myself. For a lot of these, the Minnesota Department of Employment and, what is it? The long one, DEED is what they're called a lot. The Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development is a great kind of jumping off point if you just don't even know where to start. Otherwise, these are some more kind of specific departments within Minnesota that can help you figure out what permits and licenses you might need. So like I mentioned, if you're getting into childcare, which I heard one or two of you are, you'll be working a lot with the Minnesota Department of Human Services. I'm looking at my notes. Department of Labor and Industry, I don't think that's going to be relevant to anyone. That's for like contractors, electricians, plumbers. Minnesota Board of Cosmetology, again, I'm sure some of you are already familiar with that. If you are looking, I know someone mentioned a salon. I'm sure you're already familiar with them, but they're a resource that you'll be working with for the appropriate licenses. Healthcare professionals. So I think it was Aaron mentioned opening a PCA business. You'll be working with the Minnesota Department of Health. And then that last one, Department of Commerce, is relevant to real estate agents. So I won't get too into that. So really, I know I heard lots of people in the beginning say you were curious about permits and licensing. This is the information I have for you, and it's so different for every business and every industry. So in that handout on Google Classroom, there are all of these departments listed with their websites. So if you have questions, if you're not sure if you might need any special permits or licenses, reach out to the one that makes sense for your business. Any questions about permits or licenses or sales tax? Yes, Tammy.
So like the permit for the Minnesota Department of Commerce, that would be like selling online products, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
For like the products that you are selling online, wouldn't you need the permit for the Minnesota Department of Commerce?
Nope, you don't need any special, at least in my experience selling retail online, I haven't needed any special permits or licenses. If you're curious about your specific business, I think the better place to start is Minnesota DEED. I can put that in the chat. They're that long one I already forgot, Department of Employment and Economic Development. I think that's a good place to start because they have information about all these other different departments. But my experience selling retail e-commerce has been that I haven't needed any special permits or licenses. It was outside of the sales tax, Minnesota sales tax ID.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Another kind of piece of the legal puzzle is following employment laws. So if you're planning on hiring employees either right away or possibly down the road, these are the two kind of big pieces that you'll have to keep in mind and plan for. So the first is workers' compensation insurance. This is basically required to like replace wages and like medical benefits if someone's injured on the job. So we've all heard of workers' comp. That's the short version of workers' compensation insurance. The other piece is unemployment insurance. So every employer in Minnesota has to register for unemployment insurance, and that's what benefits workers who lose their job. So these are just two pieces that you'll have to consider if you are planning on hiring employees either now or down the road. A few other pieces are federal and state payroll taxes. So employers have to withhold Minnesota state income tax from employees' wages. This is something that you can register for through the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You'll also have to consider filing reports. Employers have to file quarterly and annual payroll reports with both state and federal agencies. You'll have to consider how you want to kind of manage employee benefits and deductions. So if you're withholding any piece of their paycheck to cover things like health insurance or like a 401k, you'll have to consider kind of how you want to approach that, how much you want to cover, things like that. And then the last piece I have here is, I'm supposed to say I-9s, I-9s and W-4 forms. So these are two forms that employees have to complete for each of their employees to basically verify their identity and their eligibility to work. That's an I-9. And to also establish withholding allowances for federal income tax. This is all very legal language that I am not an expert in. I'm not an employment lawyer. I will say that that Minnesota Deed has a really, really helpful checklist on their website. I'm going to see if I can paste this for hiring. Oh shoot, I can't paste it. It is in your handout there too. But they have a really, really helpful checklist for hiring employees. There are a lot of considerations, right? Like things do get more complicated when you hire employees, and you want to make sure that you're covered legally. So that's a really good place to start, is that checklist on Minnesota Deed. And I know most of us probably aren't even thinking about hiring employees yet, but it might be something that you have to consider down the road if you want to grow. Okay, and then the last piece of this is just kind of that question, right? So ending each of these with a question: when should I apply for this? So the answer is after you've registered your business, because a lot of these licenses and permits, you will need an LLC and or that EIN from the IRS to get them. But you want to make sure that you're applying for them and actually receiving them before you start operations. So just in the same way that you want to get an LLC before you start operations, you want to get your permits and licenses before you start operations as well, because it legally protects you. So if your specific industry has these requirements on any kind of permits or licenses, you want to make sure that you're running your business legally, right? So make sure that you've not only applied for them, but if there is kind of like a wait period, that you've actually received the permit or license before you start operations. Any questions on this piece? Okay. I am talking too much, so I'm going to go right over my break. But of course, if anyone has to step away, please feel like you can. I know Leah is recording this, and I'm always happy to answer questions if you get back and you feel like you missed something. Do I see Tan has their hand raised? Go ahead, please.
Yes. This information, can you email to us after you're done, right?
So my understanding, Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, is that both the slides and the handout will be on Google Classroom?
Yeah. So let me just share that, because I can see people keep asking you the same question. Where's the website? Where's the website? It's all in the same spot. So let's help people so they don't feel so anxious that it's not there. Let me just jump in and share where it is in the Google Classroom, so that everybody knows it is available for you. So in the Google Classroom, let me just, It is here under Unit 7, Business Registration. This was Monday's lesson. It is lesson 23, Business Registration. So when you open that up, you will have a PDF of the slides that Becky is showing. And let's quickly look at this so you understand what is available to you. So these are all of the links to the websites that Becky has been telling you about. And she's got a little checkbox for each of the items she's talking about today. So confirm that your desired business name is available. Here's the website. You literally just click on that link and it shoots, they're hyperlinked right to the website. So you open up that document, you'll be able to sail right to the website that she has talked about. So here's where Minnesota Secretary of State is located to register for applying for your Minnesota Tax ID, Minnesota Department of Revenue, right there. Your EIN, right there. The beneficial ownership information, right there. Permits and licenses, depending on your business type, you would choose the one that fits with your business type. So Minnesota Department of Human Services, maybe that PCA, you want to look there, but you may also need to look under Department of Health for the PCA. The salon would look here. Let's see. And then she's going to go into some bank resources, some ideas how to have a calendar for your business. Yeah, so there is just a ton here. Secretary of State, how to get in contact with them, how to make an appointment with them face to face. This is your guide. All right. So this should be what you start to use as you start to find out exactly what you need for your business. Bethany, I'm not Bethany, Becky, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just, yeah, that first page is kind of like the guide. So it's just a simplified version of what we're talking about tonight. And then the second page is just a bunch of contact information, because I know it can be overwhelming to try and find all these pieces when they're in different places online. So we've kind of given a header to each section about if you have a question about this specific topic, this is who you can reach out to.
Mm-hmm. Now, one more thing I want to say is that when our training is over with me, which is in December, in January, you will all have an opportunity to sign up for a mentor with Women Venture. And so some of these very specific questions, if you're going to meet with them and ask questions about this particular permit, for example, they can help you a little bit more. You have to do the work, right? You have to go online, but can they help you find the resource? Absolutely. Can they help you figure out what you have to navigate to? Sure. But as far as really doing the work, you will be the one to do it, but the help will be there. Yeah. Okay, so just a reminder that that service will be available once you finish your training with us at Help Center. All right, thanks, Becky, for letting me. I could tell people are getting like, oh my God.
and it's that makes me feel good, because I'm glad that you're like taking this information and you're like excited to actually apply it. So I'm glad for that clarification. Thanks, Leah. And to like,
oh, sorry, I clicked you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I can just go ahead.
Okay.
Let's see. Can you see that screen again?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. But yeah, like Leah touched on, there are so many pieces to starting a business. I have a lot of privilege, and it was really hard for me to figure out, like, do I need to do this? Do I not need to do this? But there are so many community resources to help you through this process. You do still need like the gumption to get things done. But there are people who can help you through that process and who have been through it, and who work at these departments, and this is what they do all day, every day. So that contact information page, lean on that, because these people, they know what they're doing. They've done it many, many times before. So I hope that you maybe even print that out and just use that a lot as you're going through this process. Okay, I'm going to get into it. Where are we now? Oh yeah, business banking. Okay. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about keeping your finances separate and how to start finding a financial institution. This is an important piece of launching your business because it's very easy to just kind of lump all your personal and your business finances together. I highly recommend against doing that. There are a few reasons to keep your business finances separate from your personal finances. So when you're starting your business, if you're starting to consider actually like selling the thing or doing your service, you're starting to need to pay for maybe supplies or inventory. That's a good time to figure out where you want to have your business bank account and get it opened. So a few reasons to keep your business finances separate. It lets you clearly manage your money. So you can see exactly how much money your business makes, how much it spends, and it kind of just keeps things organized and avoids confusion with your personal money. Going hand in hand with that is that it makes your taxes so much easier. When your business money is separate, you can clearly see what expenses belong to the business because they're taking place in your business bank account, and which expenses or income is personal because that's staying in your personal account. So when you're either doing your taxes through some kind of software or you're maybe working with an accountant to do your taxes, it's really easy to see what is a business cost or income and what is a personal cost or income. And it also protects your personal money. So like I said before, one of the biggest reasons to establish an LLC or another kind of business entity is to protect your personal money. If your business gets into any kind of like legal trouble, or maybe you owe money that your business doesn't have, having a separate account can help protect your personal savings, your personal money, by showing that your business is its own thing. So some things to look for when you're considering opening a business bank account with either a bank or a credit union is to look for low monthly fees or zero monthly fees. Especially as a small business, you want to save money anywhere you can. And even a $5 monthly fee can add up, especially if it's on your checking and your savings account, then it's $10 a month. So look for accounts that don't have any kind of monthly fees. Or if they have like you have to have $500 in here kind of thing, make sure that you can maintain that minimum balance. Look for transaction limits. So this was something I wasn't really aware of, but I use cash in my business. So I am doing withdrawals and deposits a couple times a month. And there are bank accounts that will limit that. So they will only let you make a certain number of transactions every month. If you're going to be dealing with cash, you definitely want to look for an account where they don't have any kind of transaction limits, or it's high enough that you don't have to worry about that. You might also look at their online and mobile banking. So for me, I rely on I do pretty much all my business on my phone. I have a really, really old laptop that's not super helpful for doing my business. So I do almost everything from my phone. So when I was looking for a bank, I wanted to make sure that they had an app that I really liked and that was easy to use. So if that's important to you, that's something you might want to look out for. If you visit like a bank or a credit union, you can usually ask the banker to show you their app and they can kind of walk you through it. Because if you download it on your phone, you most likely have to have an account to get in, right? So if you visit the bank, you can ask the banker to show you how that works. And they'll walk you through it and you can see if it's usable, if it's user-friendly. But that was really important to me. So that was something that I looked out for. And then integration with business tools. So what this means is that if you're using some kind of bookkeeping software, which many, many businesses do nowadays, you want to ask if it if your bank account can connect to your bookkeeping software. So if you're using, for example, QuickBooks is a very common one. Xero is what I use. I asked my bank if that was able to work with, if their accounts were able to work with my bookkeeping software, and they were. So now when I do my bookkeeping, I do it online, and my bank account, it automatically shows my bank account information because I'm able to connect the two. So if you plan on using a bookkeeping software, that's something you might want to ask the banker that you're working with. All right, so how do you actually open a business bank account? So the first step, Leah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry.
No.
Alejandro? Alejandro, I have you on the meeting, but
Yes.
there you go. Okay. I need you to visit with Avery.
Okay.
All right. So click the join button. All right. It'll be
Yes.
in just a minute. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Becky.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So the first step is choosing the right bank. So you can go through those kind of things to look out for, like I just mentioned. But you also might want to consider, does this bank match with my values? Are they local if that's important to you? That was important for us. I feel like as a small business owner, being really involved in my community and in the local kind of scene is really cool as a small business to show that you have ties to the community. So that was really important for us to choose a local bank. So just find the bank that fits your needs and your goals and kind of just like who you are as a business and as a person. You'll need to gather any necessary documents. So you will need an EIN from the IRS, like we've covered, in order to open a business bank account. If you're an LLC, there are a couple other documents that you'll need. You'll need your some kind of proof of like identification. So I used my driver's license. You could use like a birth certificate or a passport. You'll also need, for my bank at the very least, I needed my articles of incorporation, which sounds really scary, but it's just a PDF you download and fill out your name and your contact information. You'll then want to choose the account type that makes sense for you. So every business is going to need a business checking account. That's how you get a debit card, right? You might also want a savings account. So I have both. We use our savings account to set aside money for tax season and also just to set aside any extra funds that we haven't paid ourselves in order to invest in the business more as like kind of a cushion or a safety net, right? So choose if you want just a checking or a checking and a savings account. And then you'll open your account. So you'll visit the bank branch or you'll apply online. A lot of banks let you apply online now. And you'll deposit your initial funds. So if they have like a minimum opening deposit, many banks do. It's usually like 100 or maybe 500. Make sure that you have that money to meet that minimum. And you'll also want a little bit of money to start making those initial purchases that you need, right? So if you're opening your business bank account, it's probably because you're ready to start buying inventory, you're buying supplies. So make sure that you have enough to meet that minimum if they have one, and also purchase anything that you know is kind of coming up. So the question, when should I open a business bank account? After you've registered your business, but before you start accepting or spending money for your business. So like I said, in order to open a business bank account, you will need your EIN. So you'll need to be registered both with the state of Minnesota and with the IRS. But you should open it before you really start spending money for your business or accepting money if you're starting to make sales. And again, that's just so that you can keep your personal and your business finances really separate and clean. Any questions about business banking? Awesome. All right, the last piece that I'm going to go over tonight is keeping up with registration. So once you've gone through all of these steps, many permits, licenses, like filing statuses, so like your BOI, have to be done, have to be maintained. So like it might be something that you have to re-up or reapply for every year. So when I talk about keeping your business compliant, I'm talking about making sure that your business is following any rules or laws that apply to it. So I'm going to use that word compliance a couple times over these next 2 or 3 slides. And so when I say compliance, I'm just talking about making sure that your business is following any rules or laws that it needs to be following. So that includes things like registering your business. That's a piece of staying compliant. Paying your taxes on time, getting the right permits and licenses. And again, if you have employees, following any employment laws that you need to be following. So some tips for kind of staying on top of all of these things and making sure that you are staying legal and operating by the rules and laws. One is to set reminders to meet any kind of deadlines. So I mentioned this before. I pay sales tax quarterly. So on my calendar, I have a reminder every 3 months that I have to pay my sales taxes. If I didn't have that reminder, I would absolutely never remember to pay them. So I highly recommend, whether you have a physical calendar or you use like a Google Calendar on your phone or your computer like I do, setting some kind of reminder so that you don't miss any of those deadlines. So that might be paying your sales tax. And it also might be, I'm kind of skipping ahead to number 3 here, but it also might be setting reminders to any kind of expiration dates for licenses or permits. So again, that won't apply to everybody, but if you do need licenses or permits, there's a high likelihood that it's something that expires and that you need to reapply for or renew. So make sure that when you are getting those, that you're noting if it has an expiration date. And if it does, you're setting some kind of reminder or putting it on your calendar. Okay, I skipped ahead to number 3, but number 2 is keeping your contact information up to date. So this is really, really important. Every application that I just went through requires your phone number and your address. So if either of those change, it's really important that you go into like the Minnesota Secretary of State or the IRS and tell them that that information has changed. Because these are very like old school government agencies, and they're mailing a lot of stuff. It's very rare that they're using email to get in touch with you. So if you do end up moving and they're still sending things to your old address, you might miss something super important, right? So make sure that if your contact information ever changes, that you are remembering it to update it anywhere that you have needed to include it. So again, that might be the Minnesota Secretary of State, it might be the IRS, and if you need any kind of special permits or licenses, it would be through that department. And then I highly recommend setting up kind of like a schedule for yourself to review any requirements for your business. This is something that I've started doing every 6 months. I just go through, I have some resources on the next slide. I'll just go here. I'll just go through the relevant departments or agencies and see if any changes have been made to their requirements for my specific business type. So everyone is going to engage with the Minnesota Secretary of State in some way because you're registered as a business in Minnesota. That's who controls that. So you can actually go to the Minnesota Secretary of State website and subscribe to email updates. It is super helpful. You don't have to remember to do it. I still check their website every 6 months or so to make sure I didn't miss anything. But that is really, really helpful. Once you do it, you kind of just don't have to think about it again. Same with the Department of Revenue. You can sign up for email alerts on updates to regulations through their website. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, so they're responsible for different state regulations, zoning laws, employment standards and laws. So if you have employees, if you are needing any kind of like zoning requirements, if you have a physical space, that's a good resource. I don't believe that they do email alerts, so I would recommend checking out their website every 6 months or so. And this is a tip that I think you should definitely check out, is industry specific groups. So for a lot of different professions, there are groups that you can join that are made up of people doing similar things. So I'm part of the Regional Booksellers Association. So I'm part of a group with a bunch of other booksellers, and I get emails on updates to my industry from them. And those are really helpful because they're specific to my kind of business. So I know that there's Minnesota Retailers Association. So for anyone who's doing retail, there's a Minnesota Licensed Childcare Association. So I know there's 1 or 2 childcare people in the room. That's a really great resource too. And then last is the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. Again, they go by DEED usually. And so they're a really good resource for employment-related laws. So if you want to make sure that you're staying on top of any kind of regulations, if you have employees, that's where you would go. All right, you guys are rock stars. We're getting there. I know this is a lot of information. I just kind of want to leave you with a couple of reminders. So one is that there are a lot of documents that go along with owning a business. And so there are some that you're going to want to keep, generally recommended by like bookkeepers and accountants, is that you want to keep any kind of important documentation, especially like tax documents or anything that might be involved in an audit, for 7 years. So if I spend money today, I'm probably going to keep that receipt, even if it's just a photo on my phone, until 7 years from now, so 2031 or whatever it is. So that's kind of like the recommendation, the good practice of keeping important business documents for 7 years. So that includes things like legal documents. So this might be, like I mentioned before, articles of incorporation if you're an LLC or a corporation. You're going to want, I guess this is a tax document, but like I said, writing down your EIN, maybe printing out that web page when you get your EIN, that would be considered a tax document. Any kind of annual reports or tax filings that you make, you should be keeping those, again, for about 7 years. Employment records, this is super duper important if you have employees, to keep all of your employment records. So things like I-9s and W-4s, employment contracts, and then financial documents. So things like bank statements, invoices, receipts. These are things that you'll want to keep in case of, again, a potential audit, which I hope none of us ever experience, but you want to be prepared for the worst, right? And then I just want to share some tips on how to actually organize those. And I recommend using all 3 of these methods kind of like with each other. So physical filing system. So if you have like a filing cabinet or some kind of like, I recommend something that's fire resistant in case, something terrible happens, your documents are still safe. But a physical filing system. So this might be folders that are organized by file type. So maybe you have like a legal folder and a tax folder and an employment folder. And so you're keeping physical copies of items. So this is important if you need like an original hard copy of something sometimes, especially if you have permits or licenses. Sometimes you actually do have to display those, but if it's something you don't have to display, and you want to keep that hard original copy, you'll want to keep it in a physical filing system. You might also use a digital filing system. So this is when you're storing important documents in the cloud. So like Google Drive is a really common one. That's what I use. Or Dropbox is another really common one. I organize my digital filing system by category and by year. So this is really useful if you're sharing documents. So if I'm sharing documents across my 2 staff member team with my husband, I can access a file on my phone and then he can access the same file on his phone, even if we're not in the same space. That's really helpful. Also, if you are working with like accountants or bookkeepers, you can easily send and receive files online. And then the last piece is backing up important files. So if there's anything that you really need to keep safe, you need to make sure that you have multiple copies of it. Again, I think like permits and licenses is where that would come into play. You might consider backing them up onto like a hard drive or a flash drive or something like that. And making sure that you not only have a physical version, a digital version, but you also have one like on something that you can hold, like a flash drive or a hard drive, in case everything falls apart. You can still access it. So again, I think all of these are really useful tools, but it's really just whatever system works best for you. The system that you use is the system that's best, right? So if you just know that you are not someone who can like keep track of a flash drive, for example, then maybe find a different way to back up important files. Maybe keep a hard copy, but keep it off site in case there's, like a fire or something terrible. Any questions about this piece? This is called compliance. So just making sure that your business is following the laws, that you're staying on top of any kind of things you have to renew every year, things like that. Any questions? I see a hand. Tammy.
I just wanted to say that that's going to be like, it's not going to be challenging for me, but that's a better, because I'm a very organized but also unorganized person. When you have a full-time daily job,
Yes. Oh
and
my
then
gosh.
you got to come home, and then you're like, okay, now I got to go to class. I got to go. So it's a challenge for me, but I'm going to invest this week into getting me a file cabinet separate from my personal file cabinet.
Good for you. Also, and I totally agree with that. I mean, yeah, holding down a full-time job, doing all your other life responsibilities, and also trying to start a business, it's wild. A tip that I have for kind of staying on top of it, but at the very least not like losing things, is having just like a messy pile or folder where I'm like, I know I need to file this or scan it or like put it into my bookkeeping software, but I can't do it right now. Like maybe I don't have the time or the brain power, but I just have it's actually behind me. I have a messy like folder. I just throw things in and I'm like, I know I need to file this. I just can't do it right this second. And then that way, you need to do it. It's somewhere that you can access it and you're not going to lose it, but you're still giving yourself some kind of like grace to maybe do it the next day, whatever it is. All right. I just want to leave you with a couple kind of reminders and like a recap of what we've been talking about. Following business laws and regulations protects both you and your business. So I've said this a number of times. It just really is important. If you follow these regulations, you do things by the book, it keeps you safe as an individual. Like I said, people can't go after your personal assets. It also keeps your business safe. So if you're following all of these regulations, if you're getting your permits and your licenses when you need to, you're not going to run into any trouble down the road. It also builds credibility and trust. So if you're following these procedures, you're doing things by the book, customers see that, employees see that, maybe partners or collaborators see that, and it fosters a sense of trust and professionalism, right? Go ahead, Tammy.
Question on like, I know that you said that some people have businesses and they have like people that are overseers of their sales, like bookkeeping and everything for their business.
Mhm.
Is it a possibility that the owner could just be a bookkeeper of their own business instead of having someone?
Yeah, that's what I do. And that's what a lot of businesses do, especially when you start out. I mean, it's just hiring a bookkeeper is an extra expense, right? So I manage my books. I do that through a bookkeeping software called Xero. I'll put that in the chat because it's not spelled like the number 0. I use Xero, which is like $5 a month. and it just helps me categorize my spending, and it makes like charts for me to see like what's coming in, what's going out, where am I spending money. And then I also just have some very like simple spreadsheets. So I use Google Sheets, that's free too. And I just track my sales. So every time that I make a sale, I put it into my spreadsheet. I make a note of the date I sold it, where I sold it, because I sell at a lot of markets and pop-ups. So that affects my sales tax. So I'll make a note of where I sold it, the date that I sold it, how much it was, how much sales tax I need to collect on it. So you can absolutely do it on your own. I don't know if the majority of business owners do, but especially when you're starting out, it's very, very common. Cool. Okay, and then the second piece, financial stability. So compliance with tax laws and financial reporting keeps your business financially secure because you're avoiding audits and disputes and things that can get really expensive really fast. And also by following these kind of like laws and regulations from the start, you're setting yourself up for sustainable growth because you're following these regulations. You're not going to run into any unexpected like legal hurdles, right? And your business can grow sustainably. So this is my last slide. I put us right to 7:30. This is basically what that handout is on Google Classroom. So this is just, if you are ready to kind of take the next steps and get your business registered, these are the steps that you would do that in. So starting with the state of Minnesota, the Secretary of State, you'll register for sales tax if that's relevant to your business. You'll register for an EIN and file that BOI. Research any licenses or permits that you might need. Look into employment laws if you're going to be hiring employees, and open a business bank account. So this is everything we covered. You have that checklist on Google Classroom. You also have that whole sheet of contact information because, again, I know this is a lot, but it is really important, and there are people here to help you through this process. So I'm sure Leah has some things to close you out, but I'm just super grateful for you guys hanging in there with me. You had such good, thoughtful questions, which tells me that you are prepared and you are ready to like do this. And that's really, really cool to see. So I'm just grateful for your thoughtful questions and your engagement. And it was so nice meeting you all. And I hope that if you do the mentorship program, we'll cross paths again. Leah, do you have anything to close us out?
I'm just going to give a few reminders for folks. And Becky, thank you so much. I was able to put, I'm going to put this Google recording into my Google Classroom in the same area for lesson 23. I really, really appreciate it. And it's awesome having a true business owner here to share that information.
Thanks, Leah.
Yeah. So have a good night, Becky. Thank you. All right, folks. Okay. I actually got to see that presentation twice because my morning class, we saw it too. Andra gave the presentation and I still learned. Watching it the second time, I still learned. So I recommend using the video. Oh, let me go ahead and stop recording though. How do I do that? Stop recording. Well, that was easy.